The shop goes to your brother. A daughter wouldn't know what to do with it." My father said that with his mouth full, reaching for the gravy like he was passing me the salt. My mother nodded. My brother Russell, who had set foot in that store maybe 9 times that year, smiled at his phone. For 17 years, I had opened Halloran Hardware at 6 every morning, unpaid, while they praised him for checking in by text. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I cut my chicken into smaller pieces and kept eating. What none of them knew was that every supplier account, every line of credit, every standing order at that store was in my name. Not theirs, mine. 6 weeks later, my father would stand in the doorway of his own store at noon with a phone full of numbers that wouldn't call him back. But that night, he still thought he owned everything that mattered. I'd already decided. I just hadn't told them yet. Before I go any further, if this is already sitting in your chest, take 1 second to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps stories like this reach the people who lived them. And drop your city and the time where you are in the comments. I read them, and I like knowing how far this travels. I'm Gretchen, 36, and what you just heard was only the first thread in something my parents spent 2 decades pulling tight around my throat. So let me get back to that dinner and what came after. Halloran Hardware sat on the corner of Birch and Sumner in a town in central Ohio you've driven past without stopping. Brick front. Hand-painted sign my grandfather did in 1971. 2 aisles of plumbing, 1 of electrical, a paint desk, a key machine, and a back counter where contractors had been buying their fittings for 50 years. My grandfather opened it. My father inherited it. And at 19, when my father's back went out the same spring I graduated high school, I started opening up. "Just till I'm better," he said. He never got better. Not in any way that put him behind the counter at 6 a.m. So I did it. I learned the registers, the deliveries, the way old Mr. Petrakis from the plumbing supply warehouse liked his orders called in before 9, or he'd bump you to the afternoon truck. I learned which contractors paid net 30 and which ones needed a phone call. I learned how to keep a hardware store breathing in a town where a Home Depot opened 20 minutes away and tried to kill us. I kept us alive, 17 years. My brother Russell was 3 years older. The plan, my parents told everyone who would listen, was that Russell would take over the family business when the time was right. Russell sold cell phone plans in Columbus. The time was never right for Russell to actually be in the store, but it was always right for him to inherit it. "He has the head for it," my mother said once, while I was reconciling the day's drawer at the kitchen table because the store didn't have a back office that locked. "You're more hands-on, honey." Hands-on. That was the word. I was the hands, he was the head. Heads inherit, hands get fed. I want to tell you, I saw it clearly back then. I didn't. When you grow up being told you're the one who's good at carrying things, you carry. You don't notice your arms. What I noticed was small. A check that never came. A "we'll square up at tax time" that never squared. The way my father introduced Russell to the new sales rep from the fastener company as the future of this place, and introduced me as my daughter, she helps out. She helps out. 17 years. You want to know what helps out actually looked like? Let me give you one ordinary Tuesday, because the cruelty of it wasn't in any single big moment. It was in the texture of every single day. 5:40 a.m., my alarm. 6, the open sign. By 7, I'd swept, counted the drawer, called in the Petrakis order, and answered 3 contractor calls about jobs starting at dawn. 8 to noon, the counter. Keys cut, paint mixed, plumbing fittings matched by eye for men who brought in a broken piece in a sandwich bag. Lunch was a granola bar at the register, because there was no one to cover me. Afternoon, the deliveries, the receiving, the inventory, the dispute with the fastener company over a short shipment that took 40 minutes on hold. 5 o'clock, the part-timer went home, and I closed alone. 6, the closed sign, the deposit, the night drop. Then upstairs, where I'd reconcile the books and place the next day's orders until 9:10 at night. And somewhere in the middle of that Tuesday, my mother would call the store, not to check on me, but to ask if I could pick up Russell's dry cleaning because he was swamped with a sales quota in Columbus. And I would say yes, because saying no was a thing daughters in our family didn't do, and I'd add it to the list of things I did for the brother who was going to inherit the place I was running into the ground of my own body. That was helping out. Every day, for 17 years. And the worst part is I was good at it, and being good at it just made it easier for them to never notice it was killing me. The night before that dinner, I'd done something I'd never done in my life. I sat down at my own kitchen table, opened a spreadsheet, and added it up. All of it. And what I found there is the reason I stopped being afraid of that family. Before I go on, quick thing, because a lot of you have lived a version of this. If your family ever called your work helping out while they planned the inheritance around someone who never showed up, tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one who counted. I need to take you back, briefly, because you can't understand why I sat so still at that dinner unless you understand how they trained me to. I was 8 the first time I remember being the help. Russell broke a window in the garage with a baseball. My father came home, saw the glass, and asked who did it. Russell pointed at me. I hadn't touched the ball. My mother looked at me, the one telling the truth, and said, "Gretchen, don't lie to your father." That was the year I learned my word was worth less than his comfort. By 12, I was the one who cleaned up after his messes. By 15, I was the one who got the part-time hours nobody paid me for, to learn responsibility, while Russell got a car for his 16th birthday to get to his friends. I drove that car to my own shifts. One memory does the work of all of them. I was 17, the spring before my grandfather died. He was failing, and he called me to his bed, not Russell, and he held my wrist and said, "You're the one who loves it. I see you in there." I thought he meant he'd make sure I was taken care of. He didn't write anything down. Old men think being seen is the same as being protected. It isn't. He died, the store passed to my father, and nobody ever asked the dying man's favorite grandchild what he'd said. That's the whole childhood. A girl who tells the truth and isn't believed, who does the work and isn't paid, who is loved by the one person too weak to make it count. So when my father said the shop goes to your brother, some part of me had been waiting my whole life to not be surprised. But I was 36 now, and I could count. The dinner that started all of this was a Sunday in April. My mother made a roast because Russell was driving in from Columbus, which happened maybe once a month and was always treated like a state visit. I'd worked the store till 2, closed, driven over, and was setting the table because that too was my job. Russell talked about a promotion. My father glowed. My mother refilled Russell's glass before it was empty, the way she never refilled mine. Then, my father set down his fork and made the announcement like it was a gift. "Russell, your mother and I have been talking. We want to make it official this year. The store, the building, all of it, it goes to you. Get the paperwork started with the lawyer. You're the one who will carry the Halloran name forward." The Halloran name. The name that was on every supplier account because Russell had never once called a supplier. Russell didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah, for sure, whenever." That was his whole acceptance speech for a business worth more than he'd make in a decade. Whenever, I set down the gravy boat. "I've been running it for 17 years, I said. Quiet, flat. My father looked at me like I'd asked for a second dessert. "And we appreciate it, but a daughter wouldn't know what to do with a hardware store, Gretchen. Russell has the head for the business side." The business side. I did the business side. I did every side. "I do the orders," I said. "The accounts, the deliveries, the payroll for the 2 part-timers. I do the taxes for the store." "You do the chores," my mother corrected me, gently, smiling. "Russell will hire someone for the rest. You can stay on and help him. He'll need someone who knows where things are." There it was, the full sentence of my life. I would inherit a job. He would inherit the store. and I'd train him to be my boss. I didn't slam anything. I didn't stand up. My ears were ringing and my hand was tight around the gravy boat, and I set it down very carefully so I wouldn't throw it. "Okay," I said. And the way they all relaxed when I said okay, the way the table went easy again. Russell back to his phone, my father back to his roast. That's the sound I want you to hear. The sound of people who have never once had me say no, because I'd never been allowed to. I drove home. I did not cry. I opened the spreadsheet. I want to be precise about what I found, because the numbers are the whole story. I started with the hours. 6 a.m. open, 6 p.m. close, 6 days a week. The store closed Sundays. I'd taken 11 full days off in 17 years. I had it in my own little planner, because I'd had to beg for each one. Call it 60 hours a week, 51 weeks a year, 17 years. That's just over 52,000 hours. Then, the pay. There wasn't any. Not a paycheck. Not a W-2. My compensation was that I lived in the apartment above the store rent-free, and my parents covered my health insurance, which I later learned meant I was on a bare-bones plan they wrote off as a business expense. So, free rent on a one-bedroom over a hardware store in our town was maybe $700 a month. Insurance, another $300. Call it $12,000 a year in compensation for 60-hour weeks. A store manager in our area made about $55,000 a year for 40-hour weeks. I was working 60. Adjusted up, the work I did was worth somewhere north of $80,000 a year. $80,000 a year, 17 years, minus the $12,000 of rent and insurance. I did the math 3 times because I didn't believe it the first 2. Over $1 million. They owed me, in plain labor value, more than the building was worth. I wrote it down. I sat there in my kitchen above the store, listening to the soda machine hum through the floor, looking at a number with 7 digits, and I felt the first clean feeling I'd had in years. Not rage, clarity. And then I made myself check the figure a 4th time, because I'm the kind of person who doesn't trust a number she wants to be true. I broke it down by year. The lean years, 2009 through 2012, when the Home Depot was bleeding us, and I was working closer to 70 hours. The math was worse, not better. The year my mother had her gallbladder out, and I covered the store alone for 6 weeks straight, no day off, no part-timer, and slept in the apartment with the baby monitor turned up in case the alarm tripped. That year alone, at a fair manager's wage for the hours I actually worked, came to $91,000 of labor I was paid nothing for. $91,000. 1 year. I remembered that year as the year my father bought Russell a used truck to help him get to a possible job interview in Columbus. The interview never happened. The truck did. I don't tell you that to make you angry on my behalf, though I see your face and I understand it. I tell you because that was the moment the spreadsheet stopped being about money. The number wasn't the wound. The number was just the proof of the wound. The wound was that every dollar I generated for that family got reassigned in real time to the child who generated nothing. And I was supposed to find that natural. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I couldn't stop looking at it, because while I was building that spreadsheet, I'd pulled up the accounts to check a date. And that's when I saw the thing that changed everything. Every single supplier account. Petrakis Plumbing Supply, the Fastener Company, the paint distributor, the electrical wholesaler, the bank line of credit, the merchant card processor, the utility accounts, the dumpster service, the alarm company. Every one of them was in my name, Gretchen Halloran, my cell phone as the contact, my signature on file. Not the store's name, not my father's, mine. Because for 17 years, I was the one who'd opened them. I need you to understand how that happened, because it's the engine of this whole story. And it wasn't a plan. It was just neglect. When the Home Depot opened and our old suppliers started getting nervous about extending credit to a dying small store, somebody had to put their name on the line. Somebody had to be the person the rep called, the signature the wholesaler trusted, the human being on the other end of the account. My father didn't want to. "You handle it," he said. "That's your area." So I handled it. For 17 years, when an account needed opening or renewing or a credit limit raised or a dispute resolved, it was Gretchen Halloran on the form. Because I was the one in the store, the one who answered the phone, the one the reps knew by name. Petrakis didn't know my father. Petrakis knew me. The fastener rep had my cell. The paint distributor texted me directly when a shipment was delayed. The bank's small business officer asked for me by name. Every contractor in 3 counties who needed a special order fitting called the store and asked for Gretchen, she'll know. The whole business didn't run through Halloran Hardware. It ran through me, through one phone number that had never, not once, been theirs. I sat with that for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and I made a decision that wasn't dramatic at all. I decided to find out exactly what would happen if I simply stopped. And the next morning, I started documenting everything, not to expose anyone, not to make a scene. Just to know precisely what I was holding before I let go of it. What I found over the next 2 weeks scared me more than my father ever had. I'm a careful person. 17 years of running a store on no margin will make you careful. So, before I did anything, I spent 2 weeks building a complete picture of exactly what ran through me. Not to attack them. To know. I made a list. A real one, account by account, with the account number, the name on the account, the contact on file, and what it controlled. I want to read you part of it, because reading it out loud is how it became real to me. Petrakis Plumbing Supply. Account holder, Gretchen Halloran. Net 30 terms, established 2011. This was the big one. Most of our plumbing inventory, 3 deliveries a week. Midwest Fastener and Bolt. Account holder, Gretchen Halloran, contact phone, my cell. They wouldn't ship to an account without verifying the holder by phone. Sherwin Paint Distributor. Account holder, Gretchen Halloran. The tinting software license, the color match account, all under my login. First County Bank. Business line of credit, $40,000. Personal guarantor, Gretchen Halloran. I'd signed it in 2016 to make payroll one bad December. My father never knew I'd had to. He just knew the part-timers got paid. The merchant processor, the company that ran the credit card machine. Account holder, Gretchen Halloran. The money from every customer card swipe flowed into a settlement account I'd set up. Then I transferred it to the store's operating account every week by hand. The store could not take a credit card without me. The alarm company, the point of contact for the security system, the person they'd call at 2 a.m., the only name authorized to disarm a false trip, me. I kept going. The dumpster service, the pest control, the website domain, which I'd registered myself in 2014 for $9, because my father said websites were a fad. The Google business listing. The phone number printed on 50 years of business cards forwarded at night to my personal cell, because who else was going to answer when a contractor called at 7 p.m. needing a part for a job at dawn? When I finished the list, it ran 2 pages. 2 pages of things that said, Gretchen Halloran. 2 pages of doors that only my key opened, and the people who thought they owned the store. My father, my mother, my brother who was about to carry the name forward, were not on a single one of them. I sat in the apartment above the store, and I understood something I'd spent my whole life refusing to understand. They didn't own the store. They owned the sign. I owned the store. I just hadn't been collecting. But I wanted to be sure. Sure the way you're sure of a thing before you bet your life on it. So over the next 2 weeks, between opening and closing the store like nothing had changed, I did a second pass. And this one was worse, because this time, I went looking for the relationships, not just the accounts. A name on a form is a fact. A relationship is a load-bearing wall, and you don't know it's load-bearing until you take it out. I started keeping a small notebook by the register. Every time the phone rang, I wrote down who it was and who they asked for. Over 12 days, I logged 163 calls to the store's number. 151 of them asked for me by name. Not the store, not Halloran's, me. Is Gretchen in? Gretchen, Quick question. Tell Gretchen it's Dale. She'll know the part. 12 calls in 12 days asked for the store generically. The other 151 were people who, without knowing it, did not actually do business with Halloran Hardware. They did business with me in a building that happened to have my family's name on it. Then I went through the standing orders. There were 9 of them, recurring weekly or bi-weekly orders that I placed automatically because I'd learned, over the years, exactly what we ran out of and when. None of those 9 orders existed in writing anywhere. They lived in my head, and in a phone call I made every Monday and Thursday by 9 a.m. If I stopped making the calls, the orders stopped. There was no system. There was me. And the part that made my hands go cold: the supplier passwords. The login for the Sherwin tinting software, the portal for the fastener company, the bank's online business banking, the merchant processor dashboard, the domain registrar, the alarm company's account. Every one of them had a username that was my email and a password only I knew. I had never written them down anywhere my family could find because my family had never once asked. Why would they? That was my area. If I walked out without telling anyone those passwords, the store wouldn't just lose its supplier. It would lose its ability to take a credit card, tint a gallon of paint, arm its own alarm, or load its own website. Overnight, with one resignation, I closed the notebook. 163 calls, 151 for me, 9 invisible orders, 7 passwords, 1 number. I wasn't a part of the store. I was the operating system, and nobody installs a backup of a person they refuse to pay. I want to be honest about the next part because it's where I almost talked myself out of it. I drove to my parents' house one more time. Not to fight, to give them a chance. I told myself that's what it was, though I think now I just needed to watch them refuse it. I brought the spreadsheet. I'd printed it. I sat at the same kitchen table where my word had been worth nothing since I was 8, and I tried to talk to my father like an adult. "Dad," I said, "if Russell's taking the store, we need to talk about transition. There's a lot that runs through me. Accounts, suppliers, the credit line. I need you to understand what's actually involved before you hand it to someone who's never done it." He didn't even let me finish. "Gretchen, don't make this difficult. Russell's a grown man with a head for business. He'll figure out a few accounts. They're in my name, Dad. Then take your name off." He said it like I was being ridiculous. "Put the store's name on. It's the store's accounts." That's not how credit works. Petrakis extended terms to me personally. The bank line is on my personal guarantee. You can't just swap a name on a $40,000 liability. My mother from the sink: "You always have to make everything complicated." And my father, the line that ended it, the line I will hear on my deathbed: "If it's too complicated for you, then it's a good thing it's going to your brother." There it was, 17 years of me holding the whole thing up in my 2 hands, and the proof that I'd held it, the accounts, the credit, the relationships, was, to him, just one more thing I'd made too complicated for a daughter. I folded the spreadsheet back up. I put it in my purse. "Okay," I said, "one more time, okay?" I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, which is worse, and I think some animal part of my mother knew it, because she watched me through the kitchen window all the way to my car. If you've ever handed someone the truth on a printed page and watched them refuse to read it because reading it would cost them something, tell me below. What would you have done with that spreadsheet? Hold the thought, because I didn't use it the way you're expecting. Here's the part everybody gets wrong about me. I didn't expose them. I didn't slam a binder of receipts on a table in front of 200 people. There was no public reveal. There was no courtroom. I just stopped. The last Saturday in April, I worked the store like always. I called in the week's orders. I closed out the drawer. I swept. I turned the open sign to closed at 6 p.m. I drove the deposit to the bank's night box. I went up to my apartment above the store, and the next morning, Sunday when we were always closed, I packed. Not everything. I'd already quietly moved most of what mattered to a friend's spare room. Marie, who'd worked the paint desk part-time for 9 years and was the closest thing I had to a sister, had been letting me stack boxes in her garage for 2 weeks. while I sorted out a storage unit. She didn't ask. She just made the space. I left the apartment keys on the kitchen counter of my parents' house Sunday night in an envelope with one sheet of paper. I'd thought about a long letter. I wrote 3. I threw them all out. In the end, it said this: I won't be opening the store anymore. All supplier accounts, the bank line, the card processor, and the utility and service accounts are in my name and my personal liability, so I'll be closing or transferring them out of my name over the next 30 days as I'm legally required to handle my own obligations. The store's phone forwards to my cell. I'll be turning that off. You'll want to get Russell set up with his own accounts and his own number before then. Gretchen. That's it. No accusation, no $1,000,000 figure, just a calendar. Then I turned off the forwarding on the store's phone number. I changed the voicemail on my cell to my name only. And on Monday morning, for the first time in 17 years, I did not open Halloran Hardware. I sat in Marie's kitchen with a cup of coffee I hadn't made at 5 a.m. for someone else, and I waited. It took less than 2 hours. The first call came at 9:40 a.m. Monday. Petrakis. Gretchen, it's Dimitri at Petrakis, the Tuesday delivery. Your father's at the store saying he didn't order anything, and there's no order in the system. But the account's flagging because nobody confirmed the standing order. What's going on over there? Because I confirm the standing order. Every week. By phone. By 9. Like clockwork. The order didn't exist in some computer my father could open. It existed in a relationship between Dimitri and me, 17 years old, that nobody else in my family had ever bothered to have. Hi, Dimitri, I said. I'm not with the store anymore. The account's in my name, so I'm going to be closing it out. You'll want to talk to my father or my brother about opening a new account if they want to keep ordering, but it'll be on their credit, not mine. Long silence. Gretchen, I extend net 30 to you. I've never met your father. Are you telling me the account I've been shipping to for 13 years is closing? I'm telling you it's in my name, and I'm taking my name off it. What they do next is up to them. He let out a breath. Well, hell, tell me where to send your last statement. I gave him Marie's address. That was the first one. By noon, my phone had 11 missed calls. The fastener rep, the paint distributor, who texted, Hey, store says they need a tint order, but my system says the account holder has to authorize, and that's you? Call me. The bank's small business officer, who left a voicemail in a careful, neutral tone, asking me to please call regarding the line of credit. As we understand, there may be a change in the business operation. The merchant processor sent an email that morning that I printed and kept, because it said in cold machine language, the thing my family had spent 17 years denying in human words. It read, Dear Gretchen, Halloran, we have received a request to modify the operating control of merchant account ending 0312. Our records indicate you are the sole authorized account holder and personal guarantor on this account. No changes to settlement, deposit routing, or authorized users can be processed without your verified consent. Please confirm whether you wish to 1. Maintain the account, 2. Close the account, or 3. Transfer ownership to a new entity, which will require a full reapplication and credit review by the receiving party. Sole authorized account holder. Personal guarantor. The money from every credit card swiped at Halloran Hardware for years had landed first in an account that the processor's own system understood belonged to one person. Me. Not the store, not my father. A machine in a data center somewhere had known whose store it was the whole time, even when my own family refused to. And one from my father. I didn't answer it. He left no message. He never did. I'll tell you what I learned that first day. Sitting in a kitchen that wasn't mine, watching a business I'd built call my phone and not theirs. I learned that I had been right about the worst thing. It wasn't the store that needed me. It was that the store was me, and they'd never noticed, because noticing would have meant paying me. By Tuesday, it had gone from a problem to a freefall. I know the timeline precisely, because Marie was my eyes. She'd taken her vacation days that week, not to help my parents, but because she couldn't bear to work in the store while it sank and didn't want to quit on the spot and lose her last paycheck. So she watched from the sidewalk and the coffee shop across the street, and she texted me, hour by hour, a report from a war I'd started just by leaving. Tuesday, 8 a.m. Your dad opened the door an hour late, couldn't find the right key. Had to call the alarm company and they wouldn't disarm a verbal because he's not the authorized name on the account. You are. Alarm rang for 20 minutes. Tuesday, 10 a.m. No plumbing delivery. Petrakis' truck went right past. Contractor showed up for a will call order that was never placed because you placed them. He's furious. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Card machine down. Settlement account is yours. The processor froze it pending the holder. You. Confirming the account change. So the store can only take cash. Half the customers walked. Wednesday. Russell came in. Lasted till noon. Couldn't log into the supplier portal. Doesn't know the passwords. Called you 4 times. He's telling people you locked them out of the system like you hacked it. Gretchen, it was always your login. I read those texts in Marie's kitchen, and I understood the strange physics of what I'd done. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't deleted a file or canceled a contract early, or so much as raised my voice. I had simply removed myself, and the removal revealed the shape of the hole, which was exactly the shape of me, head to foot. A man can't be locked out of a house he was never inside. They kept saying I'd locked them out. They'd never been in. They'd been standing in the yard for 17 years, admiring the sign, while I lived in the building. Before I tell you what the store looked like that week, I want to pause, because this is the moment I felt the thing crack. My phone rang again Monday afternoon. Marie. She'd driven past the store on her lunch break. Gretchen. Her voice was strange. There are 3 contractors standing on the sidewalk. The door's locked. Your dad's inside, but he doesn't know how to ring up a special order without the system you set up, and the card machine's throwing an error. One of the guys was banging on the glass. I should have felt triumphant. I want to tell you I did. Instead, I sat down on Marie's kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, and I cried for the first time in years. Not for them, for the store, for my grandfather's hand on my wrist, for 17 years of 6 a.m. openings that I had loved. God help me, I had loved that store, given to people who would let it die rather than say I'd built it. I'm not the backup, I said out loud to Marie's empty kitchen. I was never the backup. I was the whole thing. That was the sentence I'd needed to say my entire life. Some children are born to carry, my mother used to imply. No, I wasn't born to carry their store. I was the store. They were the ones who'd been carried. I wiped my face. I got up. And I kept exactly to my calendar. 30 days, every account, off my name, by the book, because the cleanest revenge isn't a scene. It's leaving so correctly that no one can ever say you did it wrong, but my family was not going to leave it clean. They were about to make it very, very ugly. And for about a week, it worked. I need to be honest about the lowest part, because if I skip it, I'm lying to you about how this felt. There was a stretch, days 5 through 10, where I genuinely thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Not because the store survived without me, because the story did. A lawyer's letter arrived at Marie's house, addressed to me, on day 6. My parents had hired a lawyer. The letter accused me of converting business assets to personal accounts, tortious interference with the business, and abandonment of fiduciary duty, and it demanded that I immediately restore all accounts to the business and turn over all passwords or facesuit. It was 3 pages of words designed to make a person who'd done nothing wrong feel like a criminal. I sat with that letter at midnight, and I felt 17 years old again. Because here's what they'd found. The one true thing they could twist. The accounts were in my name. That was a fact. And a fact in the hands of a man who'd been reassigning my labor to my brother since I was a child can be made to look like theft. I could see exactly how it would read to a stranger. A daughter who secretly controlled all the accounts, who abandoned her elderly parents, who walked out and let the family business collapse. Framed right, the woman who held everything together becomes the woman who held everything hostage. That was the night I almost broke and posted the spreadsheet. I had it open. My thumb was over the button. I'd already typed the caption, Here is the truth. Here is every account, every hour, every dollar. And then I imagined them reading it. I imagined my mother saying, "She always has to make everything complicated." I imagined the comment section turning it into a fight, my receipts against their tears, and the town deciding it was just a sad family squabble where everyone's a little bit wrong. I imagined begging, in public, to be believed, at 36, by the same people who hadn't believed me about a broken window at 8. I closed the post without sending it. I called a lawyer of my own the next morning, a sharp woman named Teresa 2 towns over, and I read her the letter, and I waited for her to tell me I was in trouble. She laughed, not cruelly, the laugh of a professional who's seen a bluff. "They've got nothing," she said. "You opened accounts in your own name with your own personal liability. You gave 30 days notice in writing, and you offered to transition everything. That's not conversion, that's resignation. The abandonment of fiduciary duty is the funny part. You can't abandon a duty to a company that never employed you, never paid you, and never gave you a title. Do you have anything showing you were never on payroll?" "I have 17 years of nothing," I said. "No W-2, no paycheck, ever." Then their own lawyer just handed you the better case. The day they call you a fiduciary who abandoned her duty is the day they admit you were running the company. Unpaid for 17 years. There are wage and hour statutes that would make their eyes water. She paused. "They won't sue you, Gretchen. They can't afford to find out what discovery would put in the record. This letter is a scare. Don't restore a single account. Keep to your 30 days. Let them blink." I hung up and sat very still. The lowest point hadn't been the store collapsing. It had been the half-second I believed their version of me. The relief wasn't that I'd win a lawsuit. The relief was that I finally had someone whose whole job was looking at the facts tell me the thing I'd needed to hear since I was a child. You didn't do anything wrong. You never did. I'd lost the story for a week, but the story was about to lose to the suppliers. The counterattack started on day 4. My father, it turned out, had spent the first 3 days telling everyone who'd listen a story. The story was that I'd stolen the business, that I'd secretly put the company's accounts in my own name to hold it hostage, that I'd abandoned my elderly parents and sabotaged my brother's inheritance out of jealousy. I know the exact wording because Russell posted a version of it on the town's community Facebook group, the one with 11,000 members where everyone we'd ever sold a gallon of paint to could read it. Heartbreaking update on Halloran Hardware. It began. After 50 years, my sister has chosen to sabotage our family's legacy by putting all the store's accounts in her own name behind our backs and walking out, leaving our elderly parents with nothing. We are heartbroken and exploring our legal options. Russell, who had never confirmed a single order, was going to sue the woman who'd confirmed 15,000 of them. The comments came fast. People who didn't know me, who'd never seen me open at 6 a.m. while they slept, lining up to call me a thief. So sorry. The Hallorans are good people. Family's everything. Shame on her. Hope you get a lawyer. And here's the part that nearly broke me. A few of the people commenting their support for my parents were contractors. Men I'd special ordered parts for at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. Men who'd called my personal cell and gotten me out of bed for a job. They didn't connect Gretchen, who saved my job last winter, with the sister who stole the business. Because to them, I'd always just been the voice on the phone. The hands, never the name. It got worse before it got better. Russell, emboldened by the likes, posted a follow-up 2 days later. This one had a photo of my parents looking small and old on the porch of the store, my mother's hand on my father's arm, captioned, "This is what family business looks like after my sister walked out and took everything. Mom and Dad worked their whole lives for this. We never thought our own blood would do this to us. Their whole lives." My father's whole life, as I had lived it, was a bad back and a leather armchair and a Wall Street Journal he didn't subscribe to but liked to be seen holding. My mother's whole life of work at that store was a book club she'd named after it. But that's not how it read. It read like an old couple betrayed. And the comments doubled. Someone I'd gone to high school with wrote, "Always knew there was something off about her. So quiet. Watch the quiet ones." A woman whose kitchen sink I'd personally found the obscure cartridge for, on a Sunday, off the clock, wrote, "Praying for the Hallorans. Some people have no loyalty." No loyalty. Me, the most loyal employee in the history of unpaid employment. Then, Russell did the thing that, looking back, was the beginning of his own end. He got cocky. He commented under his own post, answering someone who'd asked how the store was doing. "We're actually doing great. New systems, fresh start. Honestly, should have made this change years ago. The store runs better without the drama." The store runs better without the drama. Posted from a store that, at that exact moment, could not take a credit card, had no plumbing inventory, and whose alarm had gone off twice that week because no one knew the code. He'd just told the whole town the store was thriving. Every contractor who'd been turned away that week read it. Every supplier whose truck had driven past a locked door read it. He'd written the lie down, in public, with his name on it, and the people who knew the truth were holding the receipt. I read every comment, then I did the hardest thing I've ever done. Nothing. I didn't post the spreadsheet. I didn't post the 2-page account list. I didn't reply to a single comment. Marie called me 3 times begging me to just tell them the truth. Just put up the bank statement with your name on it. "No," I said, because I finally understood the difference between being right and needing them to know it. For 36 years, I'd been starving for these people to admit what I was. If I posted the receipts, I'd be back at that kitchen table, 8 years old, begging to be believed. I was done begging. "Let them say it," I told Marie. "Let them tell everyone I'm the one holding all the accounts. They're going to find out what that means." And 4 days later, they did. Here's what I had not expected, and what I want you to remember the next time someone tells you the quiet exit is the weak one. The truth came out without me saying a word, because the suppliers talked. Dimitri at Petrakis got the same Facebook post in his feed. Small town, everybody's connected. And he was not a man who liked being called a fool. He'd extended 13 years of credit to me, personally, and now my family was on the internet saying I'd secretly put the accounts in my name behind their backs. He commented, publicly, under Russell's post. "I'm Dimitri Petrakis. I've supplied this store for 13 years. The account was always in Gretchen's name because she's the only Halloran who ever called in an order, signed a form, or paid a bill on time. Nothing was secret. We sent statements to that store every month for over a decade. If your parents didn't know whose name was on the account, that's because they never once did the work to find out." 22 likes in an hour, then 40. Then the comment that broke it open, because Dimitri added the detail that turned a defense into an indictment of Russell's own post. "And to whoever's saying the store runs better now, your last 3 deliveries bounced because no one placed the orders. I've got the call logs. Gretchen called in every order for 13 years by 9 a.m. You've placed 0. He had the call logs. The exact thing I'd been too proud to post myself. A supplier produced on his own. Because his professional reputation had been insulted, and Dimitri Petrakis was not a man you called a fool in public. Then they came one at a time, like a wall giving way a brick at a time. The fastener rep, a man named Carl, who'd had my cell for 8 years, commented next, confirming the Midwest Fastener account was always under Gretchen Halloran because she's the only person there who ever answered the phone or signed for a shipment. Nothing secret, we mailed statements to that address every month. Then a contractor, not a supplier, a customer, a man named Dale Brunner, who built decks and had called my personal phone more times than I could count, wrote the comment that made me put my own phone down and breathe. I've spent probably 60 grand at that store over 10 years, and every single dollar of it, was because Gretchen found me parts nobody else could. I didn't even know the family. I knew her. If she's gone, I'm gone. Already moved my account to the co-op, 2 towns over, because that's where she sent me when I called. Even leaving, I'd taken care of Dale. And Dale, without my asking, just told the entire town who the store had actually been. The bank didn't comment, banks don't. But the small business officer, a woman named Pam, who'd dealt with me for years, ran into Marie at the grocery store and said, loud enough to be a choice, "Tell Gretchen she handled that line of credit better than any client I've got. Her parents are lucky she didn't let the store default in 2016. They never even knew how close it came. 2016. The December I'd signed a personal $40,000 guarantee to make payroll so 2 part-timers could have Christmas, and my father had never known, because I'd handled it, because that was my area. 4 people, a supplier with call logs, a rep with mailed statements, a contractor who'd already followed me out the door, a banker who knew a 2016 my own father didn't. Not one of them was me. Not one of them had seen the spreadsheet. They didn't need it. They'd each lived their own small piece of the truth, and when Russell told a lie, big enough to insult all of them at once, they laid their pieces down, side by side, and the picture assembled itself. The story turned. Not because I fought, because the people I'd actually worked with for years refused to let a man who'd never lifted the phone call me a thief. That's the thing about running everything through one number. When that number goes quiet, everyone finds out very fast whose number it really was. Before my father came, Russell tried first. I should tell you about that, because it's the only time he and I were ever in a room alone as adults, and it told me everything about why the store would never survive him. He showed up at Marie's on day 8 before the supplier's comments had fully turned the tide, while he still thought he had leverage. He didn't knock so much as lean on the doorbell. When I opened it, he didn't say hello. He said, "You need to give me the passwords. Not please, not how are you. Not even an acknowledgement of the years. Just the demand, like I was a help desk that had failed to escalate his ticket." "Hello, Russell," I said. "I'm serious, Gretchen. The portal, the bank, the card thing. You've made your little point. Dad's stressed out, Mom's crying, the store's a mess. Just give me the logins and we can all move on." I looked at my brother on the porch. 40 years old. A man who had, in his entire life, never once placed an order, never balanced a drawer, never met a single one of the people whose accounts he was demanding the keys to. And he genuinely believed the only thing standing between him and running a hardware store was a list of passwords. "Russell," I said, "do you know what time Petrakis cuts off the morning delivery order?" He blinked. "What?" 9 a.m. Miss it, you're on the afternoon truck, and the afternoon truck doesn't carry the half-inch copper, so you stock out Thursday. Do you know which contractors are net 30 and which ones you call before you ship? Do you know the alarm code, or which key is the deadbolt and which is the gate? Do you know that the tinting machine has to be recalibrated every Monday, or the color match drifts and you'll repaint somebody's living room on the store's dime? He stared at me. "It's not the passwords," I said. "It was never the passwords. The passwords are the only part you can see. There are 17 years of things you can't see, and I'm the only person who can see all of them. And you spent those 17 years making sure I'd never be the one to inherit them. So no, I'm not giving you the passwords, not because I'm punishing you, because passwords aren't the store and you still don't know the difference. And a man who doesn't know the difference will burn the whole thing down in a month with full access." He called me a word I won't repeat and went down the steps. At the bottom, he turned around, the way our father always turned around to deliver the line that was supposed to put me back in my place. And he said, "Dad built that store, and you're destroying it out of jealousy, because it's going to me." And for the first time in my life, the line just bounced off. "Dad inherited that store," I said. "Grandpa built it. You're inheriting a sign. And I'm not jealous, Russell. You can't be jealous of someone who got the thing you actually wanted. You can only be jealous of someone who got what you earned. You never earned it. That's the whole problem. It was never going to you. It was going to whoever did the work. That was always me. You just had the name." He didn't have an answer. He got in his car, and I closed the door, softly again, and I realized I wasn't shaking this time. My father came to find me the next day, on day 9. He showed up at Marie's house. I almost didn't recognize him standing on the porch because I'd never once in my life seen Walt Halloran come to me. People came to him. He stood there in the same windbreaker he'd worn to my grandfather's funeral, and he said, "We need to talk about the store." I let him in. Marie went to the back. We sat at her kitchen table. There's always a kitchen table. And he didn't apologize because he didn't know how, but he was scared, and I'd never seen him scared. "The store's losing money every day it's closed," he said. "Russell can't. There's no inventory coming. The card machine doesn't work. The contractors are going to the Home Depot. Petrakis won't open a new account for Russell without a credit check, and Russell's got that car loan, so they want a deposit we don't have. You've made your point. Come back and fix it, and we'll figure out the rest. We'll figure out the rest." The same words from 17 years of unpaid Decembers. I looked at my father, and I felt the last of it go quiet in me. "Dad," I said, "I'm not coming back to fix it." "Gretchen?" "Let me finish. I'm not coming back, and I'm not taking my name off those accounts for free, and I'm not signing the store over to Russell, and I'm not the villain on the internet, and we both know it." I slid the printed spreadsheet across the table, the one he'd refused to read. "You don't have to read it, but it's the value of the work I did for this family since I was 19, minus the rent and the insurance you wrote off as a business expense. It comes to about $1.1 million. That's what I gave you. For free, because you told me I was the hands." He didn't touch the paper. "I don't want your money, Dad. I'm not going to sue you for back wages, even though a lawyer told me I'd probably win. I just want you to sit there and understand, for once, exactly what you handed to Russell. You handed him a sign. The store was never yours to give. It ran on accounts in my name, on relationships in my name, on a phone number that was mine. You couldn't give Russell the store because you never had it. I did." He stared at the spreadsheet. He didn't read it, but for 1 second in 36 years, his jaw worked and his eyes went wet, and I saw him do the math without numbers. "What do you want?" he finally said. Not a question, a surrender. If you've ever watched the person who told you that you were nothing realize, in real time, that you were the only thing, pause here. Tell me what you'd have asked for. I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you exactly what I asked for because I'd thought about it for 30 days, and it surprised even me. "I want 3 things, I said. Not money, 3 things. He waited. 1. You publicly take down Russell's post, and you publicly say, in writing, in that same Facebook group, that I ran the store for 17 years and that the accounts were always in my name because I was the one doing the work. No lawsuit talk. The truth in your son's account, so everyone who called me a thief reads my father calling me the reason the store survived." His mouth tightened, but he nodded once. 2. I'll transfer the accounts and walk you through every single one. Petrakis, the bank, the card processor, all of it. So the store doesn't die, and the part-timers keep their jobs. I won't punish Marie and the others for your choices, but I do it as a paid consultant. My rate is $80 an hour, in writing, for exactly as many hours as it takes, and not 1 minute of unpaid help, ever again. You're going to pay me on a real invoice, for the first time in my life. I watched that one land. The man who'd never written me a check was going to write me one for teaching his other child to do my job. 3. And here, my voice did the thing it had refused to do at every dinner for 17 years. It cracked, just slightly, on the last one. 3. You never, ever again call what I did helping out. Not to a sales rep, not to a neighbor, not at a dinner table. You ran a store on your daughter's back for 17 years and called her the hands. The least you can do is use the right word for it now. He was quiet for a long time. "And Russell?" he said. "The store?" "The store goes to whoever can actually run it," I said. "Maybe that's Russell, if he learns. Maybe it's whoever you hire. I genuinely don't care anymore, Dad. That's the part you can't seem to believe. I don't want the building. I never did. I wanted to be seen. You could have given me that for free. It would have cost you nothing. Instead, it cost you the whole store. He took the spreadsheet when he left. He didn't say, "Thank you," but he took it, and that, from Walt Halloran, was a confession. The Facebook post went up 2 days later. My father wrote it himself, in his clumsy all caps that I could hear in his voice. I need to correct something my son posted. My daughter Gretchen ran Halloran Hardware for 17 years. The accounts were in her name because she opened them. She did the work. She was the one the suppliers and contractors dealt with. Nothing was secret or stolen. We owe the survival of this store to her, and we did not say so for too long. I am sorry for what was said about her. Walt Halloran. It wasn't poetry. It used the word "oh," which was the closest my father had ever come to the word I needed, which was sorry. And he'd put that in too. Clumsy and public and 17 years late. The comments under it were a thing to behold. The same contractors who'd called me a thief now remembered. Wait, Gretchen at the counter? She special ordered my whole bathroom job at 8 p.m. once. Didn't realize that was the daughter? She saved me so many times. Walt, good on you for saying it. Dmitry Petrakis commented one word under my father's post. Finally. Russell deleted his own post and went quiet. He never apologized to me. He did eventually start showing up at the store at 6 a.m. because he had to, because there was no one else. And I heard from Marie that he lasted about 4 months of actually doing the work before he sold the building to a regional hardware co-op and went back to selling cell phone plans in Columbus. The Halloran name came off the sign within the year. I felt nothing about that. I'd already grieved the store on Marie's kitchen floor. By the time the sign came down, it wasn't mine to miss. I'll tell you the one moment that did get me, though, because it wasn't the one you'd expect. It wasn't the lawsuit threat collapsing, or the suppliers turning, or even my father's public correction. It was a small thing. Weeks later, when I drove past the old store on my way to a supplier and saw a hand-lettered sign taped inside the glass, "Card machine down, cash only," in Russell's handwriting. The card machine I'd run flawlessly for years. The settlement account I'd reconciled by hand every week, reduced to a sheet of printer paper apologizing to customers. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something closer to grief, the clean kind, because that sign was the truest thing my family ever put in that window. For 17 years, the real sign should have read the same way. This store does not function without the daughter we refuse to name. They'd just never had to write it down before, because I'd never let them find out. Now the whole town could read it in Russell's own shaky capitals, taped to the glass under the Halloran name. If you've ever had to walk away from something you built to save the person who built it, and that person was you, I want to hear how you knew it was time. That's the comment I read first, every time. I did consult, for the record, 41 hours invoiced at $80 an hour. My father paid everyone, and I want to describe those 41 hours because they were the strangest and most clarifying of my life. I sat at the store's back counter, the one I'd worked at for 17 years, beside Russell, who'd been forced to actually show up now, and I walked him through it. The orders, the accounts, the relationships I'd spent a career building, and was now handing him like a set of keys to a house I'd already moved out of. The first thing I made him do was call Dmitry to open a new account in the store's name, on the store's credit, with Russell as the contact. I dialed and handed him the phone. Dmitry made him say his name twice, made him give a business credit reference, made him put down a deposit, because the store had no credit history that wasn't mine. It took 40 minutes to do the thing I used to do in 90 seconds, and at the end of it, Russell hung up and said quietly, almost to himself, "You did this every week?" "Twice a week," I said, "for 13 years, before 9. He didn't say anything, but something in his face had finally done the math my father never would. I taught him the standing orders. I wrote down, for the first time in 17 years, the 9 recurring orders that had only ever lived in my head, with quantities and cutoff times, on a laminated card I taped under the counter, because I am not a cruel person, and I did not want the part-timers to lose their jobs over my father's pride. I reset the passwords to a new email that wasn't mine and handed them over on paper. I sat with the alarm company on the phone while they changed the authorized contact from Gretchen Halloran to Russell Halloran. And I listened to the operator say my name for the last time as the person responsible for that building at 2 a.m, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been clenched since I was 19. The first check I ever received from my family was for teaching them to live without me, and I cashed it, and I framed nothing, because I didn't need a souvenir of being valued. I needed the value itself. I used the consulting money and a small business loan, approved fast because Pam at First County Bank knew exactly what kind of operator I was. And I opened my own thing 8 months later. Not a hardware store. I was done being the back counter of someone else's name. I opened a supply and fulfillment service for small contractors, the exact thing I'd been doing for free for 17 years, being the reliable voice on the phone, the person who knows where the part is, who calls the order in by 9, who answers at 7 p.m. when a job's falling apart at dawn. Except now, my name is on the door, and the accounts, and the invoices are all the same name on purpose. Dimitri Petrakis was my first supplier. He extended me net 30 on a handshake. "I've been doing business with your name for 13 years, he said. Wasn't going to stop just because the sign changed. The day I opened, a small leased unit in a commercial strip. Nothing pretty, a counter and a phone and a shelf of the fast-moving parts contractors always need at the worst possible hour. I did the one thing I'd never been allowed to do in 17 years at Halloran Hardware. I put my own name on the account. On every account. On purpose, out loud. With a signature I was proud of, instead of one I'd added because no one else would. The bank account, the supplier terms, the merchant processor, the alarm, the domain, the phone number, Gretchen Halloran, all of it. The same name on the door, and the door's lock, and the invoice and the check, finally pointing at the same person. Dale Bruner, the deck builder who'd followed me out, was my first customer. He walked in on opening day, looked at the half-empty shelves and the one folding chair behind the counter, and grinned. There she is, the actual store. He placed an order before I'd even finished setting up the register. By the end of the first month, I had 19 contractor accounts, 11 of them men who'd called my personal cell for years, and simply moved their business to wherever the voice on the phone now answered. That was the whole secret I'd been sitting on my entire life, the one my family never understood. A store isn't a building or a sign or a 50-year-old name. A store is the person customers trust to pick up the phone. I had been that person for 17 years inside someone else's walls. It turned out I could be that person inside my own. By month 4, I'd hired my first employee. By month 7, I was turning a profit my father's store hadn't seen in a decade. I wasn't trying to compete with Halloran Hardware. I didn't have to. The contractors had already decided which one of us was the real thing, and they'd decided it years ago, every time they'd called and asked for me by name. Marie runs my front desk. She gets a real salary, paid time off, and a sign on her own counter that says her name too, because I will not build a thing on someone's unpaid back. Not ever. I know exactly what that costs the person at the bottom of it. I see my parents at holidays, on my terms, for a few hours. My father, to his credit, has never once called my work helping out again. He says Gretchen's company with a stiffness that I've decided to read as respect, because at his age and with his spine, that's about as far as he bends. My mother still refills Russell's glass first. Some things don't change. I just don't sit at that table waiting for the second pour anymore. I bring my own bottle, and I leave when I'm full. People ask if I regret how I did it. The quiet exit, the calendar, the 30 days. They expected the binder slammed on the table, the receipts thrown in a face. the public destruction. I don't regret it. The loudest thing I ever did was the most silent. I stopped opening the door. Marie asked me once, months later, if I wished I'd fought harder. Sued for the wages, posted the spreadsheet, made them say it on camera. I told her the truth. The fantasy of forcing them to admit what I was died the same week the lawyer's letter came. Because I realized that even if I won that fight, the prize would have been their admission, and I'd have spent my whole life again organizing my worth around whether they granted it. The day I stopped needing the apology was the day I stopped being their employee in my own head. That was worth more than the $1 million. It was the only thing they'd never been able to take, because I'd never given it to them. I'd just forgotten I was still holding it. For 17 years, I thought my value was in how much I could carry without being asked, without being thanked, without being paid. I thought if I just held the whole thing up long enough, someone would finally look down and see whose arms it was resting on. They never looked. So, one morning, I stepped back, and the whole thing came down to the ground, and everyone finally saw, in the silence where my 6 a.m. used to be, in 11 missed calls by noon, in a phone number that had never been theirs, that I had been the only thing holding it up the entire time. I'm not the hands anymore. I never was. I was the whole store, walking around in a body they refused to pay. Every morning now, I still wake up around 5. Old habit, but I don't open anyone's door but my own. I make my coffee. I look at the sign with my name on it, my actual name, the one they put on every account and never once on a check, and I drink the first cup slow. The store needed me. They just couldn't afford to admit it, so in the end, they didn't keep the store. They kept the sign. I kept everything that was ever real.